and regularly gives talks on mycology, ecology, and plenty of other outdoor-related subjects. So if you'll please welcome Taro.
Joe, you killed my presentation. There we go. Okay. All right. So, thank you everybody for coming. I'm the opening warm-up act for the main show tonight and tomorrow. And there's a little bit of a change from the announced schedule. So the first kind of working title for this was First Steps, and Joe said, you can get a little more advanced than that. So instead of Next Steps, I called it Mushrooming for Mere Mortals, because not all of us can be John Pischke, or Roz, or Rick. There are plenty of non-professional mycologists or non-super amazing amateur mycologists, and so this presentation is for us. I count myself in that group. For those who already know all this stuff, a lot of what I talk about today is applicable to whatever topic you want in the natural world, and some of it even beyond. It's about learning. A few years ago, I did a program called Meta Mushrooming, which is learning about mushrooms. This is kind of a brother in arms for that one. So, mushrooming for mere mortals. Here we go. Attack on our brains. So, there is so much information out there, and it seems like the pace of new species being named or species being names being changed because of DNA sequencing or other has escalated to the point where, from when I first started mushrooming 20-something years ago, using this classic, the names in here have changed in some cases 3 times since that publication. So to keep up with the literature is just overwhelming. And just to kind of give you a scale of the mind-blowing amount of data coming our way, this is what I feel like sometimes. This little ant being attacked by some kind of entomophagic fungi. And if we put that in numbers, 20,000 plus described species of mushrooms, 3 to 5 million species of fungi estimated worldwide. In the year 2020, according to AI, 2,900 new species described. That's where AI comes in really handy, because who could count that otherwise? So there is just so much data coming at us. And I'm guessing for most of us, you have lives outside of mushrooms, whether it's families, professional lives. Maybe you want to knit or crochet or do something else too. And so the demands on your time can't keep up with the data coming at you. So how do we handle that situation? And in keeping with my theme of not quite superheroes, not quite super artists, I talk about not superpowers, but reasonable powers. Things that us normal people can do to try to keep up with that data coming at us. How you can become a better mushroomer without needing to know everything that you come across. So first and perhaps biggest takeaway from this, Clark Kent is a pretty cool dude. All right, he gets overshadowed by his alter ego Superman. But Clark Kent, think about it, he's got a stable career as a reporter. I'm not sure if Lois Lane is a realistic love interest or if she just has it out for Superman, but he's got his life pretty well put together, right? You don't need to be a superhero to be successful. You, me, do not need to know every single mushroom we come across in order to be decent mushroomers and to enjoy what we're doing, and that part is the most important. So do not have your ego crushed if your identification is corrected. Do not have your ego crushed if on your walk you can name 2 out of 20. That's all okay. And coming up with reasonable expectations for what you want to learn is one of the really important lessons I think you can take away. Okay, Batman, not Superman. So I'm actually not a comic book person. I stumbled across this font that kind of inspired me, so it's a comic book font. And as hopefully everybody knows, Superman from another planet flies, super strength, all that stuff. Batman, normal person, rich, maybe not like us, but a normal, non-superpowered being who uses technology and tools to compensate for that lack of amazing ability. We can do the same, especially now. So compared to mushrooming 20 years ago, the things that are at our fingertips that, if used wisely, can make us much better mushroomers, makes it a different ballgame. There's still a place for Roz, there's still a place for Rick, and having those people that have all that knowledge and who can interpret it and who can find the flaws in AI and algorithm identifications, that's invaluable, but it can let the rest of us take a step up and learn from those tools. Neighborhood watch, so know your locale, and I think this is super important. Again, 25,000 plus named mushroom species out there. You don't need to know 25,000 mushroom species. If you mushroom primarily in your own county, you can shrink that number of species that you need to focus on way, way down, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Laser vision, all right? So reducing your scope, all right? Focusing in, honing in on something specific, that can be a trick that we use too. And flash cards. So that's a little memory learning tool that I'll talk about. And there are some apps out there that you can use that do spaced repetition. There are pre-existing libraries of digital flashcards that you can use. I'll talk about those too. Okay, be a cyborg. And this is where we can augment our human abilities with technology. So the one that I'm going to focus on is iNaturalist. Has everybody used iNaturalist before? And if you have not, you can find me after this. I'm not going to go through everything about it, but it is an amazing tool. And even if you're not an active observer recording and uploading your data, although I recommend it, you should, you can still use its query features to get a whole bunch of information that'll help you as a mushroomer. So I'm going to go over it a little bit. So this is basically what you'd see if you're using the web page. So this is an observation I made from a couple of years ago. And using this app, it's free. You create a username, and then basically you're taking pictures, uploading that data. It includes the date and time, the location. It posts it to a community science page where other people can see your observation and can make comments or change identifications. It also has an amazing algorithm that will help and propose identifications. So this is what you'd see if you click on any one individual observation. Now, to get that information up into the website, this is what the old version of the app looked like. So on your phone, you open up the iNaturalist app, you click Add Observation, and this is what you get. You add a photo, you can take it on the spot, and it gives the date automatically. It will upload the location. You can add it to projects, and you can specify if it is something like a planted flower in a garden. Now, critical for getting the most out of this is taking good photographs. You don't have to be an artist, but what you do need, especially for mushrooms, and this goes for any time you're sending photos to a mycologist, if you're uploading it here, you have to include as many key bits of information as possible. So on this one here, we've got a few different bits of information. So first off, we can probably say this is a hardwood forest, right? I'm not seeing any conifer needles there, so that's good information. We can see, looks like some maple leaves, perhaps some oak. There's some invasive stuff going on there. But for the actual mushroom itself, the key bit of information in this one is getting the entire mushroom with the stem. So all of you may already know that this is an Amanita, and by exposing that bulb and including it in the photo, it's going to make the algorithm give you a better identification suggestion, but also every human that sees it too. Here's an even better example. So, key bits of information. Okay, we have the cap, we have the underside of the cap, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen mushroom observations with no photos of the stem and the underside of the cap. So critical information. You can upload more than one photo when you do your observations, and you can even put multiple mushrooms in the same photo. So in this case, I plucked the one, flipped it over. So we have cap, stem, gills. We also have that really interesting clue in the back right. So everybody probably knows this one, maybe knows this one, aborted entoloma. So this was a real nice find that I was able to make that had all the key bits of information. So going back, once we post the photo, and ignore the example here, this is a picture of a snake, the algorithm will suggest identifications. If you have an iPhone in the new version of iNaturalist, it will actually give you the percent level of confidence that it's giving you. So if it's 99% confident, that's pretty good. If it's 50-50, you probably are lacking some information that's necessary for the algorithm. All right, so then you would choose which of those you think it is. You can kind of work off region here. So if this is taken in New York, it's not going to be a Western garter snake or a Plains garter snake or a Northwestern garter snake, so you can make a reasonable assumption here, common garter snake. And going back again to our example observation, we have pine needles. So we're getting that information. We have the top side of the cap, the gills, the stalk. So that's all the information needed for both the algorithm, but also other observers. Any questions so far? Cool. All right, iNaturalist. We're not done, because as I was saying before, when you're confronted with so much data out there, narrowing it down, really important. So this is what, again, the web page looks like. And if we filter, so on that top right, you can filter the database. This is a filter for just fungi. And as you can see, there are 60 million observations of fungi on iNaturalist, 25,675 species and counting. That includes yeasts and molds and lichens and everything like that. 100,000 identifiers, 985,000 observers. That is a lot. That is way more than any of us can, maybe any of us can learn. I'm looking at you two up front. Not sure. It's a lot of information. How can we get that to be more useful for us? So we hit the filter button. You can see all the things you can filter for. In our case, I filtered it for Litchfield County. I filtered it for the dates of this foray last year, so that we can kind of get an idea before we even hit the trails of what we might expect to see. And here it is. There were 86 observations, 54 different species. And when we look at it, oh, last year, this was pretty good for chickens. Last year, there was also a couple other edibles. There was Lactarius indigo, so the indigo milkcat, Fistulina americana, that's another species name change. It used to be Fistulina hepatica. So this is doable. If you did this before every mushroom walk you went on, you could kind of cram, do that last minute cram, and then consider being out in the field your test of what you studied.
How do you get iNaturalist on your phone?
So if you go to the App Store, so iPhone App Store, Google Store, the Play Store if you use an Android, and then you basically just install it.
You go to the store on your phone.
Yep, yep. There's another one I didn't talk about called Seek, which is kind of real time. You have like augmented reality, is that right? You basically have a live camera screen and you can point it at things and it will identify it. Not great for fungi because you can't capture all those bits of information, the stem, the underside, the top of the cap, and the habitat all at the same time with Seek, so I do not recommend that for fungi. Okay, so getting away from the cyborg part, let's choose some easy targets. So this comes back to reasonable expectations. If you are a brand new mushroomer, don't make the mistake that many people have done and try to identify everything you see by stepping through every book you have. It's not a great way to learn. It's incredibly frustrating when you don't get that identification. Instead, what I recommend is choosing the easy targets. So, learn mushrooms with obvious handles, where it has that one characteristic, maybe two characteristics that set it apart from everything else. Those are easy to learn. That's a great place to start. Once you build your kind of vocabulary of those easy species, then you can start to add on to it. Now, again, this is just one approach. You could take it, you could leave it. I'm gonna recommend some others as well. So some good candidates for this approach: bird's nest fungi, stinkhorns, puffballs, things like that. Things that are very distinct, often not the cap and stem mushrooms that we often think of. Some examples of things that you'll see on our walk, perhaps. So Schizophyllum community, the split gill, and looking at that mushroom, grows on wood. It's got a very white, fuzzy looking top surface, and then the characteristic that really sets it apart are those forked gills, the gills that split from the center outwards. This guy here, everybody's seen, maybe not always with as much color. I did not get the underside of the cap. Even so, we can get an identification on this. This is the violet tooth polypore, something you are guaranteed to see. Learn it, you'll see it on every walk through a forest that you go on in this area. This guy here, another common one we find. Another little tip is when you're doing your mushrooming, if you want to get the most out of your mushroom season, learn the woody stuff in the wintertime. Don't waste your time on it in the summer. Don't waste your time on it in the fall, unless it's really dead out there. You can concentrate on the polypores, those woody guys, in the winter when nothing else is around. This guy here, super distinctive. This is Hydnellum peckii. They call it the red juice tooth. One odd little thing about iNaturalist is it comes up with common names that are not common at all. I don't know where they come from, if it's an AI-generated common names. I've never heard red juice tooth before, but that's that guy right there. Okay, the fiddler crab technique. So, does everybody know this guy here, fiddler crabs? They've got the one giant claw and the one little claw, like that. We can learn a lot from the fiddler crab because what it does is it masters one thing, all right? Everything else is kind of a little puny, but you can master one thing and impress your peers. So, if you choose a taxa, or even kind of taxa being a group in the same genus or in the same family, if you learn one of those, you can be your club's expert on that one taxa. So, if, for example, I was to learn the stinkhorns really well, all of a sudden, the club looks at me every time they find a stinkhorn. I am the stinkhorn man at that point. So there is value in just focusing on one, learning it really well, and then expanding outwards from there. So some examples of taxa that could be good to focus on, because there are not too many in our area. These are the puffballs, Lycopterodon, Lyco wolf, Peridon wind, the wolf fart mushrooms. So just imagine this. You could be your club's wolf fart mushroom person. All right. Or the stinkhorns, there you go, Phallus ravenellii. What I caution you against, there are certain taxa you probably do not want to get bogged down with unless you really are devoting your life to that. Amanita, don't recommend anybody jump in and try to learn every Amanita. Unless you're going for a PhD or something like that, it's not for the faint of heart. Mycenas could also be very difficult. Russulas, there's a whole bunch like that. But if you break it down, right, maybe you're just doing non-red russulas. Okay, now it's a little more achievable. But by focusing in on that, all of a sudden you're gonna get to know really well all the characteristics you need to identify, whether it's starting to look at spores under a microscope, whether it's starting to do chemical tests. You can dive deep in one subject, grow your knowledge, grow your skills, and then build off of that. Okay, yes, drive them mad. This is a slightly different technique. Rather than focusing on taxonomic groups, you can focus on just the edibles. Is it edible? And I am going to say that this is not a bad question to ask when you are on a walk. If you don't know something, you can blame me. It's not terrible to ask. Now, I wrote this out. Mycologists generally hate getting this question, and this weekend you can try it out if you don't believe me. So if you're on a walk with John Pushki, just ask him like 5-6 times. But as a learning tool, it makes a lot of sense. If you focus on just those ones that are edible and easily identifiable, your knowledge base starts to grow and grow and grow. Plus you have incentive to learn those ones because they are edible. Fantastic book. I have it over there if anybody wants to take it. It's called 100 Edible Mushrooms. Wonderful book. It starts with the easy ones and then progresses over the course of those 100 mushrooms to the ones that are getting a little more difficult. If you use that book, you would learn a ton about mushrooming. Now, the caution on this is that is it edible question should only be asked once for each species. Because if you're asking it a second time, you're not learning. You are passively absorbing. It's like watching TV. It's not how you learn. You have to really focus, learn the characteristics so that the next time you come across that one, what you would then ask is this that mushroom that I think it is, right? Because at that point, you're using your own brain, you're trying to learn. Yes, and then once you've gotten your repertoire of edible mushrooms down pretty well, pretty solid, again, then you can start expanding into those ones that nobody wants to eat. Your knowledge keeps growing, you have good meals. All right, we're getting towards the end. Wow, this was quicker than I expected, so I expected lots of questions from the audience. All right, so these are kind of miscellaneous tricks. And we're gonna start with my favorite. So this is the secret weapon for aspiring mushroomers. It's from this book here. This is the National Audubon Society Field Guide to Mushrooms. Does everybody have this book yet? Is it still in print after they released that new version? Does anybody know? There's a new version of Audubon's Mushroom Guide that I do not like. This is the classic written by Gary Lincoff, who was a Coma and YMS guru, amazing guy. I gotta confess, when I first started using this book, wasn't a huge fan. I do not like the Audubon format where it has the pictures separate from the descriptions. Did not like that. The pictures themselves, not the best, and that is no criticism of Gary. But Coma used to run something called Mushroom University. Has anybody taken that? Yeah. It was great. Gary is, or was a showman like no other, and in 10 minutes, he made the entire tuition for that series of courses well worth it, and I'm trying to pass that knowledge along. So, the key to using this book is in the appendix, all right? Most people, if you're like me, you don't look at the appendixes. Once you hit the end of the book, you close it, you move on. If it's fiction, nonfiction, this is worth its weight in gold. It's the spore print color chart. It's the appendix for this book. Put a Post-it note on it because this teaches you so much about mushrooming. It teaches you how to look at mushrooms differently to get all those characteristics that you're gonna need to make a reasonable identification. So it might be a little hard to see in the back, so what I'll do is kind of walk you through it. So the very first question it asks is spore print color. Because so often that is the end. If you're like me, you don't want to wait 6 hours or overnight to get an identification, but that is the starting point. There are some tricks. So here's an example of a mushroom where you can get a spore print even before, does everybody know how to get the spore print off a mushroom cap? Good, cool. So you're not newbies, and it's a good thing Joe told me to aim a little higher for this one. So, yes, you can sometimes, and I say this with caution, get the spore print by looking at the underside of the cap. And it is not 100% reliable. Do not trust it for edibility purposes. But on this guy, and you can kind of make out a little color on the underside of the cap. Maybe. Greenish. All right.
Grayish.
Yeah, this is where the projector doesn't quite capture the real color. There are very few green spored mushrooms, so that's going to be a critical diagnostic factor. So again, sometimes you can look at the underside of the cap and get the spore print color, but not always. Much better is when the mushrooms are considerate enough to grow next to each other and overlapping each other. And then you move the guy on top out of the way, and you can look at what he's dropped on his neighbor's head, and there you can see that color right there is the color we're looking for. So those are kind of the quick and dirty ways to get the spore print color if you don't have patients like me. So going back to the spore print color chart, the questions it asks, once you know the spore print color, first question, GA is the first column on the left, gill attachment. All right, so by looking at how the gills touch the stem, or maybe they don't touch the stem, in which case they're free, that is one of the key characteristics for key clues towards getting the identification for your mushroom. So some classic mushrooms that have free gills are going to be your Amanitas. Mushrooms that have the gills that run down the stem, called decurrent, Clitosipes, chanterelles, things like that. Attached, basically, gill, cap, stem, touching. That series of characteristics is clue number one. Next, veils. So, I don't have illustrations of this, but everybody envision the classic Amanita muscaria, your Smurf mushroom, right? So red cap, white spots on the top, ring around the stem, and if you scooch away some of the dirt at the base, it has that little bulb at the bottom. All right, so what we're looking for with that is partial veil, universal veil. So for this, I'm gonna kind of act it out a little bit. Does everybody know those combinations of characteristics already? You're gonna make me act it out then, okay? So, all right, here we go. Not every mushroom has a universal veil, first off. Some mushrooms, they start out as a little primordia attached to the mycelium, right? And it starts out in a membrane. So, here it is. I am the little mushroom in my universal veil. I have a membrane covering my whole body. All right, it rains. The mycelium absorbs the water. The cells from that primordia swell up, and the mushroom pops out of the veil. Some of those spots, some of the veil pieces, the membrane pieces, might be stuck to my head. White spots on top of the cap. That's a sign that it was from a universal veil. Right? So the white spots on top of the Smurf mushroom, parts of the universal veil. That either sac or bulb at the base, also parts of the universal veil. So if you see V, you know part universal veil. Next part of my acting out or my charades. Okay, mushrooms don't pop out fully emerged, right? They pop out with the cap closed like an umbrella. They pop out and then the cap opens. Now some of them have a membrane that attaches stem to cap edge. When it opens, it rips, leaves that partial veil, the annulus. Okay, so if you see that, you know that mushroom could be something like maybe a Cortinarius or an Amanita, but that's what that annulus, that ring around the stem, the skirt is. So that's your second characteristic, gill attachment, then veil. H is for habitat, and this is incredibly underrated by mushroomers. Waiting, there was a book written by a bryologist, Sue Williams, who did a whole field guide based on ecological characteristics. Is it growing next to a stream? How high above the waterline, things like that. I'd love to start developing a book like that with much smarter, more knowledgeable people for mushrooms. Now, thinking about time of year and what kind of forest they're growing in, or maybe not a forest at all, you can again narrow those characteristics down so you're not thinking about 4,200 species of mushrooms or fungi that grow in New York. Instead, you're narrowing it down so you have a reasonable amount of data to sift through. So in this case, H, habitat, W is wood. If it's growing out of wood, chances are it's a decomposer. Next would be G for ground. If it's growing out of the ground, chances are it's a saprobe, which means it's eating dead organic matter, or it's mycorrhizal. How is that information good for you? Well, most of the mushrooms that you buy in the grocery store are going to be decomposers because they can be farmed, right? Most of the mushrooms that you pay exorbitant prices at the farmer's market for are going to be mycorrhizal, seasonal, wild collected. So having that knowledge is going to help you, because you're not going to find a morel growing out of wood. You're not going to find a chicken growing out of the ground unless there's a buried root. So knowing those ecological characteristics is extremely important. Also, many fewer examples of D in that characteristic, in the H column, habitat column. D would be for dung. Okay. Some of these mushrooms can have multiple characteristics, so it could be G or W. For example, in this Baeospora, could be some buried wood, something like that. Okay. Any questions about spore print culture? Get the book while you can before it goes out of print. Next, high-tech index cards. So, flashcards, you probably all remember them with bad memories from high school history or something like that. It's something you don't have to do, but it can really increase your ability to learn mushrooms and remember mushrooms. It's a great activity for the winter when you're not going out into the woods. So there are 3 apps and probably some more that have been made since then: Quizlet, Anki, and Mnemosyne, M-O-S-Y-N-E. They're all digital flashcard apps. You can make your own flashcards. You can make your own decks. What I recommend is using those good photos that you took over the summer, over the growing season. All right, that would be one side. And then on the back, you can put the name and any of the distinguishing characteristics that you see. All right, the idea for these flashcard apps is not that you go through the entire deck every single time. By the way, you don't have to use these digital ones. You can use pre-bought ones. However, the big advantage the digital ones have is called spaced repetition. So this is a proven memory retaining technique where basically at the cusp of forgetting something, you quiz yourself on it and then it refreshes your memory. So if you really know, pick your mushroom, Trametes versicolor, turkey tail. If you really know that one and you get it every time it comes up, you're not going to be quizzed on that one maybe once a month, all right? But if you guess one of your flashcards and you get it wrong, well, the next day it's going to quiz you again. And the next day it's going to quiz you again until you start to really demonstrate that you can retain what that is, at which point the spacing grows. So it's a great way to learn them. There are pre-existing mushroom flashcard decks on some of these apps. I believe they're all free, so it's a great resource. It could be even a club project for the winter to come up with one. And then for the images, even if you're not a photographer, you didn't take anything over the whole season, there are a whole bunch of open source photos that you can use. So iNaturalist has a bunch that you can use without license. Wikimedia is another one. So basically what it looks like, this would be on your phone. This is your app. You would choose your flashcard deck. It might show you that photo right there. And you would guess it. and you'd be able to indicate whether you got it right or got it wrong. You can also use some that have multiple choice. I recommend not using the multiple choice. All right, next trick, this is a quickie. This is Michael Quo's from 100 Edible Mushrooms. So before you start to test your identification skills out in the wild, if you are a new mushroomer, go to a grocery store, go to a farmer's market, buy one of each, and look at the funny look you get at the farmer's market when you try to do that. And by learning those mushrooms and the combination characteristics, similar to what we did with the spore print color chart, you can really grow your handle or grow your knowledge of the vocabulary needed for later on in the book. That is one of the biggest challenges of learning any new field, especially biological, is they all come with their own terms and vocabulary, which can be really intimidating to somebody that's new to it, but that approach, by learning new vocabulary with familiar objects, really does help. All right, and we're getting to the end. This is the this and that section, so just little hodgepodge things that I thought of at the end of this. Has anybody read Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow? So it talks about system 1 and system 2 thinking. So system 1 is that kind of passive thing. You don't really, you're almost on autopilot. When you're watching TV, if you're watching a YouTube video that's teaching you how to paint, system 1 is not going to be effective. System 2 is where you really focus and really concentrate on something. If you look at a mushroom out in the field and you thumb through your guide and you find that matching picture, I think that's system 1. That is shallow thinking. If you see that mushroom out in the field and you take the time to sketch it, to describe all the characteristics that you're seeing, that then becomes a system 2 thing, and your ability to retain it is going to be that much better. Now, if you're like me, where you're not a great artist, and maybe you're not patient enough to write a half-page description of each one, this is again where technology comes in really handy. Take your phone, turn it on video mode, videotape the mushroom while you talk over it, describing each feature that you see. Then you can play it back for yourself in the winter, you'll retain it better. The other thing you can do is if you're on a walk tomorrow, for example, and John Plischke or someone else, one of the walk leaders, stops, shows everybody a mushroom. To retain it, you can just do a little video clip, say the name that he's taught you, and again, repeat those characteristics, and now you have a video library field guide. One other little trick, while you're in bed, but before you fall asleep, choose one mushroom from your walk, replay it in your head. Replay what it looked like, where you found it, what its name is, what the characteristics are. You'll add one mushroom each day, in theory, and again, your vocabulary, your repertoire of mushrooms will grow. Another winter project, a lot of the mushroom identifications on iNaturalist, there's something called research grade, where somebody confirms someone else's identification. This could be good practice for you. So if you know one mushroom really well that you just learned, for example, go online, look for observations for that species, confirm it or deny it. If somebody got it wrong, you can help them out by saying, not really, it's missing this characteristic. So that is another trick. Now, that's the end of my presentation, but we have so many smart people in this room, so many knowledgeable people in this room, way more than myself. So this is where I'll ask if anybody has some tricks or tips they'd like to share, or I can certainly take questions about anything I showed. Yes, Roz?
Speaking of the Audubon guide, if you just thumb through the edges of the pages, have the shapes of the mushroom, and that's another useful identification. See on the edge there, in the middle?
Yeah.
Can you say that again? I didn't hear it.
So the Audubon Field Guide has mushroom silhouettes. They actually have a table of contents based on the silhouettes. Some people like that as a characteristic, and it does match the pages too. So you can kind of almost do it like a non-verbal field guide if you wanted to. Zach, you're You're an amazing mushroomer. How did you learn?
Mushroom University.
All right.
I learned off the Audubon guide as well, and that's still my favorite because it's a real field guide. If you take the dust jacket off, it's a plastic cover that can actually go in your pocket as sweat resistant. Yeah, that's the only book that I have that fits in an average sized back pocket.
Yeah.
So that's a great guide.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, if you do pick a specific genus that you wanna learn, as he was talking about, like puffballs or whatever, over the winter, you could make your own guide using the pictures that you did. I did that with Russulas. I have a big binder of Russulas,
Wow.
and over the winter I used the Fado key, and I created a whole book of Russulas. And doing that over the winter kept that information fresh when I was going over it, so.
Awesome.
You can do that with any genus.
Yeah.
So you brought me back into the world of teaching about mushrooms, and my 8th graders had a particular fondness for throwing them. And that's all good and well, but the point was that if I could get them to remember some type of experiential connection to the species, they would remember it for a long time. Oh, that's the purple one that's slimy and sticks to your finger. Oh, that's the one that smells like horse dung. Oh, that's the one that if I throw it at a tree, it sticks. Or that's the one that tastes really peppery hot. That some connection that brings it more than just through the eyes and the mental cognition of a shape really, really help them learn it faster.
Cool. That's great. Yeah.
I have a question about iNaturalist.
Yeah.
So, what's the kind of etiquette for asking other people to help you with identifying your finds?
Yeah. So what I've found is, and maybe some people will disagree, but if you post something as life, if you don't take, for example, the algorithm identification and you just leave it blank because you really don't know, not many people are going to comment or make suggestions. And people may disagree, but it might be better to post something that you're 90% sure about than to leave the identification blank, because chances are, like maybe some of you in the future, somebody will look at it because they're familiar with that, they just want to confirm. And this is where, like, you have to kind of put ego aside, like, you're gonna be wrong. It happens, and it happens to the best of them. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Now, that said, do not trust iNaturalist for edibility. If you're planning to eat it, do not trust the iNaturalist identification. Do not trust even other people's identifications unless you know them. One of the big traps in iNaturalist is, Joe Schmo takes a picture, he says it's this thing, expert corrects him, and then Joe Schmo confirms the correction, and now all of a sudden it's research grade because it has 2 agreeing opinions, despite the fact that one guy is just buying the identification of someone else. So for that reason, do not trust iNaturalist identifications or any kind of algorithm identification for edibility. This is where you have to still remain in charge. Do not let the computer drive you over a cliff, kind of thing. I joke that if there ever is an AI uprising, we know how the mushroomers will get bumped off because it'll give us bad identifications and repeat stuff that we shouldn't. So did that answer kind of?
Yeah, well, I was also asking about like tagging other people
Oh,
that
yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah.
For asking them for help. With
I think
identifying.
if somebody's got like 15,000 identifications, chances are he's like the expert in that field and he's going to be comfortable doing it. You can also look, so for each species, there's a leaderboard. Who has seen the most, who has identified it the most. That person that's doing that many identifications probably is not going to mind if you ask them, if you tag them at Schneider A to help with an identification. In fact, you're padding his ability on the leaderboard to confirm it. So, but it's you're dealing with people at that point, so who knows?
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just started using iNaturalist this year on another non-mushroom project. And what really helps is if you want to take one particular mushroom and look for the ones that haven't been confirmed yet, and look at it and see if you agree or not. And by looking at all these different pictures of all the different angles and everything else, I found I got really good at identifying when something wasn't what they said it was. So then you get to be the pro at that one particular mushroom.
One